Welcome to another episode of Business with Passion. Each show features guests who have transformed their long-term passion into a successful business. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton Roth. My marketing strategy business grew from my love of talking with passionate business owners. In this series, I share their passion with you. So if you're looking for inspiration to enhance your business passion, keep watching.
So my long-term passion has been all about entrepreneurship, I guess, in a very quick summary, and taking it a couple of steps beyond that, contribution, working with other exciting opportunities and people. That's really my long-term passion. From 6 months old, I left the UK where I was born and traveled all over the world. My father worked for an American corporation his whole life. So we moved to Europe when I was 6 months old. Then we moved back to the UK. I went to 10 different schools. Then my parents moved to the Middle East, and then they moved to the US, and then they moved back to the UK. So as a child and as I grew older, I manifested a whole bunch of skills or learnt those through the process of going to a bunch of different schools, a bunch of different cultures. Indeed, I even learnt several different languages, including Arabic and American, which helped me working with my friends and colleagues here as I moved here. From a young age, I've traveled a lot and experienced a lot, and that helped me a lot being an entrepreneur. So when I was 18, I bumped into a friend, and as you do at that age, didn't really think too much about business, other than the fact that I knew that I really wanted to go out to work. My parents were quite happy to try and fund me through university, but I didn't want to put them under any more financial obligation, and our family at the time was better suited to me going to work, and I loved that idea. So a friend approached me with an idea for a business, and we set about very professionally, building that thing, building up marketing materials, and it was in a very mundane area in cleaning of cars and offices. And we came up with this sort of a bunch of young kids, and we would go around and we had all the professional machinery that would enable us to, do a proper car wash, or indeed we did office and home cleaning. So for an 18-year-old, it was a pretty sophisticated business, and the only problem was that we made so much money in 3 days a week, we only bothered to work 3 days and took the other 2 days off. So that's how we started out. Any entrepreneur that's been doing this for a long time knows that life isn't simple. Any business owner, indeed, whether they be a small one or those that invent amazing companies like Google, know there's a lot of wrong turns. One of the things that I think is interesting in my very beginning of my entrepreneurial career, which I mention a little bit in my book, is my mother was a good influence to me and helped me with a basic idea of raising some money very early on for my first business. And we weren't a wealthy family, but we had a couple of people in the family had a couple more bucks than the average. So I wrote to one of my very favorite people in the world, who owned, weirdly in those days, a hat factory, because hats were very popular many years ago. And he wrote me back a letter, and that letter basically said to me, "You're nuts if you become an entrepreneur." Now this was a shock, because this particular guy had been through the war, his family had been annihilated in Auschwitz, but he was one of the happiest, most successful, and let's call them happy-go-lucky type of characters I knew. And so it was very unusual to get that type of letter, and it was a real knockback for quite some time. He said, "No, I don't have the money, I'm not giving you any, and even if I did have any, I'm not going to give you any, because I know it's a rocky road, and I know that life is complex and difficult as an entrepreneur, and you'll be much better off getting a good education and going out and getting a proper job." And so that was really interesting, and I think many entrepreneurs have gone through that, whether with their parents or other people, trying to influence them. And luckily for me, I decided to ignore that advice. I think it was good advice, and I think it was well meant, but I decided to ignore that because something inside me just had this passion for getting out and doing and creating a business, and so that's what I did. So, after the age of 18, when I started my first business, I realized pretty quickly that some of these things were, manual labor and all this stuff, and at the time, which was the early 80s, the computer business was taking off. So there was a lot of advice coming through from my family that, running this sort of small business, which was really a hobby, was probably not the best use of my skills. So I decided, with some nudging, to get in the computer business. And in fact, I've been in the computer business my whole life since then. Now, the first half of my career was mostly in a bunch of different computer companies, software companies. And then the second half of my career, which has really been plus 10 years now, for 12 years, was as an entrepreneur, starting my own businesses. So weirdly, I started very young, then I went to work for big business, then learned a lot of skills, and then I applied those then into my own ventures. From the last 12 years or so, I've started a number of different businesses, mostly again in my skill set, which have been a new media agency. That's a company that makes websites. I used to work in the early stages of the internet, and was one of these guys that was involved in the infrastructure. So I saw the internet coming along, so I started a new media agency. From that, I then built a software business. And then I also got into some leisure-based trading, which was fun and totally tangential because a friend approached me to invest in that. So those were some businesses I built in the UK and sold. Subsequent to that, I had a family and took some time off, and then I started to build the current businesses that I'm involved in. One's a software business called Alperon, which makes the world's only hosted software licensing platform, and the other one's an investment and let's call it a management consulting business, which helps people with mentoring and building their businesses. So one of the interesting lessons that comes about if you've been an entrepreneur for a period of time is if you go back and look at some of the many, many mistakes that you've made, and in my case, I seem to have made an awful lot. Several things come to mind. The first thing is the one big mistake I made very young, and I should have rectified, and I would encourage anybody else to, would be to get a mentor. And one of the reasons I spend a lot of time mentoring and I've mentored so many people is because I realized how dumb I was for not getting one. One of the great benefits of a mentor, what could have happened for me, is it would have stopped me falling down these very large holes, which seem to happen a lot. And I spent most of my career as an entrepreneur digging myself out of a dumb hole I'd made. The second thing is that, and the reason I wrote the book partially, was that often I would use the fire, ready, aim rule of business, which subsequently most people learn is the wrong way round. So to a certain extent, I would get very excited and passionate about an idea. I would jump in, and then several months or years down the path, I would think, why did I do this? This wasn't so clever, or this wasn't such a great idea, or whatever it was. And the upshot of that is that nowadays, so I help with mentoring. That's one problem I made and I try to help fix. And the book is also helping with the thought process which goes around planning your life, deciding why you want to start a business and trying to bring these two things together. What do you want out of your life? What do you want out of your business? And try and get them to match. Now that's easy to say, not so easy to do, but it is very important if you're going to be an entrepreneur that you have passion throughout the process, which can often be 5 or 7 years. Now, it's very easy to be passionate for a year. We all know that. Anybody that's ever had a lover before knows that you can keep it going for a year, but after that, often you can burn out, the honeymoon's over. So with a business, often with your life savings and your family's life savings, you won't be able to do it. So my advice, and one of the great lessons I've had, is get a mentor and think about it before you jump in, particularly in today's recessionary times where it'd be easy to lose your life savings if you were to jump in without thinking about it. You know, people do ask me, you're a full-time CEO with a different business, and most full-time CEOs work at least 60 or 80 hours a week on that business. Why the hell are you doing mentoring? And the truth is I do work 60 to 80 hours on my other business. And you know, mentoring just happens to be one of those things that's a passion for me, and I think is very important for my life, and fits in with some of the major tenets of my life, which are driven very much around, as far as is possible as for a human being, to be grateful for what I've got and to contribute in some form. Now, obviously, working for a living and having an early stage business, which I do on the left hand, is contributing and in the normal sense. But many of us have lots of other gifts that we wish to give, and And from my perspective, one of those things is a lot of experience in mentoring and frankly a lot of mistakes, which I hope to guide others around. So contribution and mentoring is a great deal of my life, and it may be the evenings and it may be the weekends, and I wrote a book over many years because I don't have much free time. So day to day, every day I'm involved in mentoring in one form or another. The people I tend to mentor mostly at the present time are MBA students. I'm involved with the London Business School, which is now my 8th year. I'm involved with 2 lots of Stanford, the technology and the business school areas of Stanford, and UC Berkeley, Haas Business School. I have mentees from all of these different prestigious top 10 universities. That's great. And also, I do help friends, family, other connections. And those people tend to add a lot of spice and interest because they're less academic. I mean, I've worked with people from goat farms to camera stores, the weirdest of different business ideas, which are all very exciting. So my life is full of very great vicarious experiences where I get to experience other people's businesses, and that's part of the juice that comes out of it. And also, as you can probably tell, this is what gets me out of bed in the morning. I love it, and as time moves on in my life, I'm sure I'll spend more and more time mentoring and less time doing business, depending on how successful I am.
I'm taking a course at a business school with a few other MBA students, and we're working on the viability of a startup idea, and this is how we came to meet Jon. I've always wanted to be part of a startup because I like being in an environment that's really fast-paced and utilizing cutting-edge technology. Myself and my teammates, we came up with this business idea, and none of us have all that much experience. It's a financial investment tool, and none of us have that much experience with starting up a company. So Jon is just this untapped wealth of information, and he's made all the mistakes that we're probably going to make, and hopefully by talking to him and learning from him, we can avoid some of the mistakes that we would otherwise make.
So mentoring takes many forms. Sometimes it's a warm approach when you're just trying to help people through things, but often, particularly as the MBA students, for example, get towards the end of their course, they actually need to pitch venture capitalists. And a lot of my job is, in fact, playing devil's advocate. Indeed, some of the most fun sessions for everyone when we've gone through a lot of the learnings, often many months of mentoring have taken place, and then we all get in a room and I pretend to be a VC. And I ask lots of pointed questions and push the individuals. And it's a bit like being an athlete, really. At the end of the training, you've got the sprint to come. This is the day before. You've got to warm up, and you need the coach to really get you on point. So often my job is a great mix of different things. And one of the things to do is to push and challenge people as well as to support them. And in particular, when it comes to getting grades and getting good grades, then my job is to make sure people are very well prepared, and that often takes the place of pushing them and making sure that they've done their homework before they get into the lion's den, as we would call it, dragon's den, depending on which TV shows you watch, with real-life VCs, because most of my MBA students end up learning with the real-life VC, and a lot of their grade comes from their performance.
So now that we covered our bases about how we make money on this business, right? What is our business model strategy? Let's see how much money is really out there to be taken, right? So based on our target market, we decided to select and focus on our kind of these large organizations. We focus on the organizations that actually have cost of goods sold. So we kind of removed all the software organizations, all those guys that don't have any COGS to report, and we kind of came up with a $9.5 trillion yearly exchange there, right? We want to be certified by two of the ERP.
Is that expensive
leaders.
or difficult? I mean, what's it take to get ERP certified?
So that's we're sizing like maybe about 2 developers for a whole year in order to get us to that stage.
Is there any cost, or is it just you've got to meet certain standards?
That's a good point. I'll bring that up. I don't have the data.
Okay.
Good question.
Just a little bit of feedback on style. Use kind of a lot.
Huh?
You use kind of a lot.
Okay.
So where people go, you use kind of. So
Okay.
you're letting your brain catch up with what you want to say, and you say kind of. You said it about 50 times.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Very good, by the way, very good use of body language. You kept your base very steady, but you very, all of you so far have been very good at getting the point across by using body language.
I took away a perspective of entrepreneurship in a slightly more broader sense, in the sense that, entrepreneurship on one hand is setting up a company from start, but it's also sometimes bringing in new ideas, new products into existing organizations. And I think some of the learnings that I took away from the sessions with Jon, I feel are really broadly applicable. So I really don't look at this as, hey, you want to really set up a company and then, Jon is going to give you some ideas and structure. I think that what you will learn from Jon will be probably, useful for you in a much broader sense of, the word of entrepreneurship. And I think that from my perspective, there were two things that I, really valued a lot from those sessions. One was, the specific content of what Jon was sharing, and obviously sharing from his own experience. But the other was also, in some level, some kind of role modeling. And you're looking at an entrepreneur who is successful. You're observing how is he able to find the time to come and do these mentorships. How does he conduct himself, through the daily pressures of being an entrepreneur. And how does he think about what skills does he have? And I think that you come away with the whole experience thinking that, it is doable. That it is more scientific than you think it is. It's not just about being lucky. It's about being perseverant and being passionate about something. So I think that there are different sort of aspects to what you can take away from the experience.
And one of the things that I highlight in the book, I'm very lucky. I've been married for 10 years, and I've known my wife for 21 years, which is a good proportion of my life. And so one of the things I say in the book, and one of the things I would encourage any entrepreneur who wants to have a life of entrepreneurship, is to make sure that when you work with a business idea, that you also introduce this concept to your family and to your friends and to your loved ones, and try and explain to them, if you can get it across. If you're a brand new entrepreneur, maybe you need some help like my book to tell you what being an entrepreneur is going to be like. If you're a seasoned entrepreneur, you'll be able to explain to them, look, life is not normal. Entrepreneurs are weird people. They're often crazy in a nice sort of way. And the critical thing is to communicate. I'm very lucky. I spent a lot of time with them, explaining to my wife, the objectives of the businesses that have been formed, how that will impact the family. If it goes well, what good will come from it? If it goes badly, what are the downside risks? What the lifestyle is like. And if I didn't have the support of my children and my wife, because frankly, that is why I am doing it. And this is very important, since many entrepreneurs do not know why they are doing it. In my case, I know I am doing it. I explain to my family, and when they don't get to see me because I'm often away or traveling or working with others when I could be spending time with them, they know that it's part of my passion. It's something that's important to me, and I'm not wasting my time, I hope. I'm hoping that the contribution is really helping others. I mean, I've helped over 150 students, and my family can see the positive benefits that accrue from doing that to those individuals, and I think that they get some of that come back to them and they feel good about that. So the point I'm making is, in order to be able to do all these things and write books and run various businesses, you have to have a lot of energy and you have to have a lot of passion. And that passion has to be driven by having a goal and an outcome. And the goal and the outcome, for most people, I think, if they really sit down and think about it, is not a Ferrari or a big house on a hill. It's usually about having a fulfilling life, achieving something, doing something good, and being able to be proud about that, and also working towards the goals, perhaps, that your family has, and providing a good quality life for them. But also, being happy and fulfilled is a critical piece, and I think all that has to come together as part of the life of an entrepreneur in order for you to be able to be successful. And in my case, for me to be able to keep running at this speed, I need to be very clear on what I'm trying to do, and I need the support of others in my family in order to be able to do it. One of the things I did in my very busy life is take the time to write a book. And I am not, unlike my wife, who is extremely clever, a naturally talented writer per se, but I did have a lot of learnings from working with MBA students, and I had also a burning desire to try and help as many people as possible. And so I was very lucky to find a publisher called Wiley, who are very well known, to adopt the cause. And my objective in writing it was twofold. The first one was to try and assist as many people as possible, if you like, taking the mentoring I do one-to-one and pushing it out there into as many hands as possible. And the second one was, it's partially an act of contribution, and I wanted the result of the success of the book financially to go towards helping other entrepreneurs in one form or another. And my wife and I spent some time trying to decide where would be the best place to put the proceeds of the book. And we landed upon a fantastic institution, a non-profit called the Grameen Foundation. And the Grameen Foundation essentially is an organization which helps generally people in Africa or countries that need assistance, or although they do help many, many countries now, usually with a loan, not with a handout, to start a small business. Often that small business may be a fruit stall. It may be just the money to plant some land, to grow some crops. It's very, very basic. It's almost the opposite of what I do in life. I'm a high-tech guy. This is like a very low-tech idea. Most of these loans are very small amounts of money. And what's incredibly impressive, particularly in today's society, is they have a 98% repayment rate. It must be the best repayment rate in the world, from the poorest people in the world. I was blown away. I was inspired. And so from my perspective, the book is there to serve as a marker. Even indeed in the first few pages, it asks the reader to think about contribution as a critical piece. And I'm trying to point out that contribution is an integral part of the life of an entrepreneur, and this book is part of that process. Most business books that exist today deal with post the decision. Some excellent books on the marketplace. Most of them are about skills and things that you might want to learn, or stories about how somebody else has been successful and how you may learn from them. And when I looked into writing a book, one of the reasons I wrote it was because I didn't see very many other books that dealt with the decision to become an entrepreneur. And so this book focuses on that piece. It doesn't explain all about how to write a business plan or raise funding. It's all about should I or should I not be an entrepreneur. Now, in today's very gloomy world, there are many highlights which generally relate to great entrepreneurial experiences in my view, and a lot of people may want to jump into that watching TV and seeing all these great shows where there's these incredible people being very successful and making a lot of money. This book is a little bit of a cautionary note. It has a bunch of mentoring sessions in it, and it's designed specifically around the reader, and it helps the reader with workbooks and a quiz and very simple and easy to use information which enables the reader to make a decision. And that decision simply is, should I or should I not be an entrepreneur? And indeed it could be, should I not be an entrepreneur right now? Perhaps I would make great entrepreneurial material, but in the case of one of my mentees recently, I'm just about to have a baby. This is probably not the greatest time to be an entrepreneur. However, I would make a great entrepreneur, but I've got to get my timing right, which is probably, in this case, in a year's time. So the book, in essence, is trying to achieve that aim. I find myself talking a lot right now about a recession. It just happens to be the time that we're in, and it's pretty tough for everyone. When it comes to thinking about starting a business in these recessionary times, I think that the word think is the critical piece. Many people start a business without thinking whether it be a recession or not. What recessions do is they open up a huge number of opportunities. Most successful businesses have come out of problem times. Look at Google, came out of a problem time, and you could probably list 10,000 other businesses. So now is a good time to start a business, but only if you've been very thoughtful and careful in starting it, which frankly should always be the case, but right now it's doubly so. So my advice is, in a recession, money is always hard to come by. People are motivated differently in a recession than they are normally. What motivates people in a recession? Well, it's pretty obvious. Probably want to save some money, and they probably want to make more money out of whatever it is that they've got. Or they may want to do things differently than they did before, which has the same outcome. It gets the job done better. So from a business perspective, my tip is, can you think of something, a business or an idea, which can achieve those objectives? Can it do it on the minimum amount of money? Or if you are thinking of doing a business, and this is the first time you've ever done a business, I say to you, stop. Read my book, or something like it, or get a mentor. Do not jump in with your life savings. First, make sure that you've got the passion, that you've got a great idea, that you've just looked at those things I just said, and your business definitely maps to them. And then consider very carefully before, with your loved ones, with your family, before you spend their life savings, on the idea that this is acceptable to everyone, because it's going to be harder than normal to achieve this. So my tip is, think and plan carefully as to what you can achieve in a recession, and to be very cash conservative. Do not start a business that needs a lot of money, because right now most people are keeping it in their pocket. They don't want to hand it to you. Therefore, you need to be able to build and develop a business. Hopefully they can get to profit quite quickly, or cash flow positivity quickly, with whatever resources you've got in your own control. In essence, I would spend the rest of my life trying to develop this idea of helping others and contribution. I think as I get older, I'll refine it and become better at it. I think that I will try and lead and inspire and develop a greater awareness of entrepreneurship. And, you know, if I was to dream big dreams, I would encourage as many people as possible to contribute, to feel grateful for what they have, to help others. And perhaps from the perspective of entrepreneurial training, I would try and get that into schools. I would try and encourage a vast number of people that feel excluded from entrepreneurship because of their age, because of their race, because of their level of education, how much money they've got. A lot of those people feel restricted from being an entrepreneur, or perhaps it runs against the grain of their family or their culture. And get as many people to try this as possible, but not in an unthinking way. I often read where similar people have ambitions like that, but the problem I see with those is they're blind. They just encourage people into entrepreneurship without necessarily the planning or the thinking through or the involvement with the family, or, you know, making sure that what they're doing is a big idea or a great dream or a passion of theirs, so that they're much more likely to be successful.
Thanks for watching this episode of Business with Passion. If you'd like more information about Jon Gillespie-Brown, other shows, or perhaps to be a guest on a future show, go online to tv.manygoodideas.com.